The 2022 NFL draft class is nearly 2 full years into their careers, and some players from this class have already made a big impact at the NFL level. But not every player that gets drafted is going to be a future superstar, and that's the reality of the NFL draft. It's kisses and hugs for one weekend in late April, and then it is time to get to work. And in today's video, we are going to redo 4 picks from the 2022 NFL draft. We're going to discuss the thought process for each franchise at the time when they made the pick that hasn't panned out for them, and we are going to discuss a player that was right in front of them that would have been a significantly more impactful player. We're also going to discuss what hasn't worked out for the player that was selected and where the franchise would be if they had a do-over. And some of the picks less than 2 years later may be pretty surprising, and it may stun you how quickly a franchise can go in either direction. And there is a lot to dive into in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video with the Saints selecting left tackle Trevor with the 19th overall pick. I didn't like this pick to begin with, and I wasn't a huge fan of Trevor as a draft prospect, and he has not worked out at all for them. He missed most of his rookie season due to a torn ligament in his foot, and that kind of is what it is. Players are going to miss time due to injury, and in Penning's case, we would find out who he is as a player in 2023. And in 2023, the results weren't pretty, and when we discuss the Saints on the channel, especially in weekly recaps, a lot of the time it's discussing how inefficient they are in the red zone, which, by the way, credit to New Orleans for scoring a lot in the red zone against the Lions in Week 13, or how frustrating offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael is at times. But early in the 2023 season, Penning was a big liability for this offense. And liability may be too light of a word, as in the first 6 games of the year, he allowed 19 pressures, had 4 sacks allowed, and even had 7 penalties. And this isn't a direct correlation to Penning, but in the 6 games he played, Derek Carr was sacked 17 times, and in the 6 games since Penning was benched, Carr has only been sacked 7 times in 6 games. What particularly concerns me with Penning is I was never a fan of his technique in pass protection, at least consistently, as every draft prospect will show flashes of consistency as they are entering the NFL draft for a reason, but the whole bully mindset and getting into fights in the pre-draft process did not make me think this guy is going to kill it at the next level. And sure, you can say you want your linemen to have that mindset rather than being passive, and that's completely okay. But I thought drafting Penning at 19 was very high, and especially when you factor in what the Saints did to acquire this pick. They gave up their 2023 first rounder to Philly, who eventually drafted a player by the name of Jalen Carter. So when you look at this pick for the Saints, it's a double whammy. Penning is not good and is currently the 3rd string left tackle, and Jalen Carter is probably going to wreak havoc for a long time. And the player we would redo this pick with is Cowboys left guard Tyler Smith. Smith played his rookie season at left tackle and kicked inside to guard in his 2nd season, but I think Tyler would be just fine for New Orleans holding down the left side. Everybody has hits and misses in the draft process, and I like Smith more than Penning in the 2022 draft process, and if the Saints were going offensive line at 19, I really thought Smith was a better player for them. He is 2 years younger than Trevor, and again, is a better football player. Now, from the perspective of how this would have impacted the team in the present day, I don't think the Saints would be Super Bowl contenders with the addition of Tyler Smith on their team, but getting Derek Carr beat up in those first 6 weeks may change a game here or there. And not only that, but the Saints financially have a lot of problems with the cap, like they do every year, and having a good left tackle on the rookie contract would go a long way. Having a good player on a discount helps teams win games, and it would also relieve Derek Carr, Mickey Loomis, and the Saints fans watching their quarterback get drilled every time Trevor Penning was out there. We're at the point where Saints fans are hoping he works out, but he will turn 25 next offseason, and I think the Saints will also be looking for Trevor Penning's replacement. Next up is one Minnesota Vikings fans do not like talking about, and it's their first round pick from 2022 in safety Cine. This can be a pretty sore subject for the Vikings fanbase, as the Vikings were on the clock with the 12th overall pick and not only traded back, but traded back with the division rival Lions and allowed them to get wide receiver Jamison Williams. And with safety as a need for the Vikings, they also opted out of drafting star Ravens safety Kyle Hamilton. The Cine pick particularly stinks for the the Vikings because this was GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's and Kevin O'Connell's first draft pick as a GM and head coach duo, and we're less than 2 years in, and it absolutely stinks. There's no talking yourself into Lewis panning out and becoming a good player, at least not in this point in time. If he does, I would gladly be wrong about this, but we're nearly 2 full seasons in, and Lewis Cine has registered 2 defensive snaps as a Minnesota Viking. 2. And they were both in his rookie season, with one coming against the Eagles and one coming against the Saints. Lewis broke his leg against the Saints in week 4 of the 2022 season, and I do not recommend going and looking up the injury because it was pretty ugly, but we're at the point now where Cine doesn't get on the field. We're at a point where he is a routinely healthy scratch, and I know Cam Bynum has been good for the Vikings, so that kind of patches it up, or at least takes some of the pain from missing this pick. But when the Vikings were on the clock at pick 12 in the 2022 draft, forget Lewis Cine for a minute. There were 3 or 4 players the Vikings should have taken at 12 before trading back, and we can go in any direction here. Because Kyle Hamilton is a safety, these 2 players are often discussed on Vikings social media, and it's basically the Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson situation, but in safety form, and this time the Vikings were the team who made a bad decision. Kyle Hamilton playing next to Harrison Smith during the final few years of Smith's Hall of Fame career would have been incredibly fun, and it could have, and arguably should have happened. But Kyle Hamilton isn't the only player the Vikings could have drafted in this situation. I would have also loved them drafting Jordan Davis, the big fella from Georgia, in an effort to get stronger and tougher defensively, and that would have helped the run defense in a big way. And by the way, the Vikings' run defense has been good in 2023 outside of one game, which ironically was the Eagles game back in week 2, and we say ironically to that because Jordan Davis was, of course, drafted by the Eagles. But even a receiver like Jameson Williams would help the Vikings offense in a big way strictly from his presence. I know the Vikings have Jordan Addison, and this is in no way saying I would rather have Jameson over Jordan, as much as it is going back and discussing how the team would look with Williams on the field. Justin Jefferson is an elite route runner and is without a doubt one of the best players in football, but from a coverage perspective, how would throwing in a guy who can run a sub 4.3 40 in the offense change things? Well, for starters, defenses have to account for J-Mo, and that would not only open up the intermediate passing game even more for JJ, but for tight end TJ Hawkinson too. The unfortunate part about Lewis Cine is that it was essentially, oh no, he broke his leg, we hope he gets better, and that was kind of that. Nobody hears from him, nobody hears anything about him unless it's that he's a healthy scratch, and it's kind of just accepted. Like, yep, we drafted a first round bust, let's not bring this up and move on. But having any of Kyle Hamilton, Jordan Davis, or Jameson Williams, even before the trade back, would help this team out in a big way. Next up is not only a draft-altering one, but a franchise-altering one, and it's simple. The Titans should have never traded wide receiver A.J. Brown. All A.J. has done since the trade is have back-to-back 1,000-yard years, and there's 5 games left, and there's a very good chance A.J. has back-to-back 1,400-yard double-digit touchdown seasons for the Eagles. Treylon Burks was the receiver drafted when the A.J. Brown trade happened, and to date, Treylon has 41 career receptions for 566 yards and has a singular touchdown. Immediately after A.J. was traded to Philly, he signed a 4-year contract worth $100 million with a little over 57 in guarantees. And outside of DeAndre Hopkins, the Titans receiver room is a complete mess, and the top 3 receivers after Hopkins are Nick Westbrook-Akine, Chris Moore, and Kyle Phillips. Treylon Burks has played in just 6 games in 2023 and is 8th on the team in receiving yards with just 122 on the year. And even when the pick was made, I thought it was frustrating at minimum, and had this pick worked out, all the Titans were doing was hoping Treylon would become the player AJ was. And I know it's easy to say look at the player AJ is now and say how dumb the Titans were for not paying him and having him be their number 1 receiver, and I would agree with that. But, and this is a big but here, AJ Brown has elevated his game since he became an Eagle. When Philly made this trade, everyone was naturally happy they were giving franchise quarterback Jalen Hurts another guy to throw the ball to, and to have a great duo between AJ and, of course, Devonta Smith, but I would be surprised if anyone thought that barring injury, AJ will start his career with back-to-back 1,400-yard double-digit touchdown seasons with the Birds, and that would be the do-over pick for the Titans. We mentioned this in the weekly recap, but the product the Titans put out every week is not good, and there's a reason they're 4-8 and are 25th in points per game. I'm glad they went out and signed DeAndre Hopkins, because without him, this would be by far the worst receiving core in the NFL, and even with him, it's not like they're a team anybody fears. Pairing A.J. Brown with a rookie Will Levis would do wonders for his confidence and building him up as an NFL quarterback. But what do we get every Sunday? No separation, no good players to throw the ball to aside from a 31-year-old receiver who's clearly lost a step, and poor offensive line play. Obviously, AJ wouldn't help with that part, but the pirate routes or the quick ins that you see AJ often run and take a quick pitch and catch for 25 yards would help the Titans out in a big way. And all they had to do was pay him. And when these teams faced off in 2022, AJ made sure to let them know that they made a bad decision. He had an 8-catch, 119-yard, 2-touchdown performance in a game the Eagles would go on to win with the score of 35-10. And that 25-point beatdown the Titans suffered at the Link in 2022 really summarizes how each franchise has went since draft night and ultimately since this trade was made. The Eagles nearly won a Super Bowl with AJ on the roster, and while they are a good team, the success they have had isn't nearly to the level it is without Arthur Juan. Tennessee has been a dumpster fire since this trade, and they are currently in a rebuild that will take several years. Next up is the Jags selection and their choice to make Travon Walker the number 1 pick over Michigan's Aiden Hutchinson. This was always going to be a risky move, and I want to credit Travon as the floor for him as a pass rusher was low, but I think he has performed better than a lot of the public perception was pre-draft. The do-over, of course, would be to select Aiden Hutchinson number 1 overall, and to have a duo of Josh Allen and Hutch get after quarterbacks and make their lives hell for the next several years. But heading into the draft, it was easy to fall in love with the physical intangibles of Travon Walker. He was listed at 6'5", 272 pounds with a wingspan of over 7 feet, had a 36-inch vertical, and ran a 4.5 140. This type of athleticism at his size does not come around often, and the thought process when this pick was made that if he pans out, he could be a Danielle Hunter type player, and even in the worst case scenario, Travon is a bull in run defense, or at least was during his time at Georgia. And obviously you don't draft a good run defender number 1 overall, but you take a chance on the grand slam upside of Walker and hope it pans out. Travon is still 22 years old, and I don't think the jury is entirely out on him, but I do think Hutch is a better player than Travon, and the Jags have positioned themselves to be able to control their own destiny in the playoff race. And having a guy like Hutch, who, like Josh Allen, is in the top 10 in league in pressures, would go a long way into getting the number 1 seed and securing home field. Making a guy's life like CJ Stroud, who you will have to defend for probably the next decade, or even conference rivals like the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, or Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, who ended your season last year, making those guys' lives hell would mean a lot more to the Jags than what Travon is currently producing. Hutchinson's pass rush win rate of 19.9% is more than double Travon's win rate of 9.4%. The perception around these players in the pre-draft process made it sound like at times that Hutch was a wily old vet and there was a clear ceiling to his game, meaning 8 or 9 sacks. But Hutch is only 4 months older than Travon, and the draft process made it seem like at times that Hutch was a 24 or 25-year-old rookie, while Travon was only 20 years old. I respect the Jags going the route they did in swinging for the Grand Slam, but this concept of teaching a player everything at the NFL level, meaning Travon pass rush moves and techniques, the highest level of football there is, on the fly with the number 1 overall pick is not something I can get behind. I don't think the Walker pick was laughably bad by any means, but Hutch would be the do-over pick less than 2 years later. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 28% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.